Today we're going to be talking about getting started with Revit, of course, some of the basic rules and things that you'll need to know before you ever get started within the program. It's not as simple as just like in the old Autocad days, you could just start a drawing from scratch or take a previous project and kind of make it your own, kind of do that with standards. With Revit, it's a little bit different. You can take old projects and kind of make them new projects or create use them as a go-by and a standard, but we'll talk about that when we get into different workflows that you guys can take advantage of moving or transitioning into Revit from a CAD-based workflow. We'll talk about some similarities between AutoCAD and Revit, as well as some of the techniques that you would require to use in Revit that you already use in AutoCAD. So a lot of what I do with my training groups when we talk about learning this process or moving into Revit is I let them know if you're a Power CAD user, you should be able to transition into Revit pretty easily just by learning some of the basic rules. Rule number one with Revit is to always use the proper template. I can't stress enough why that is, how important that is, and I'll show you some of that here in a bit when I pull up Revit and we start getting into the picks and clicks. Also understand that project management is built into the Revit project. So for years and years out in the industry, back in the olden days, I used to use, or we always used File Explorer, Windows Explorer. We pulled up a file folder on the server, and we had a list of folders that we would use to manage all of our projects, PDFs, DWGs, docs, etc., right? Images, whatever that was part of the project externally from the program. So there's a difference when you're working with the Revit project, and when you're new to this process, that's what's different. It's kind of it has, if you're familiar with AutoCAD, Sheet Set Manager or Project Navigator built into your projects, and we'll get into that in a second. Determine the workflow early, and what that means is there's different tactics you can take to transition into Revit from AutoCAD or any CAD-based workflow, really. You can use what we call the phase approach or a hybrid workflow and take advantage of your CAD details and CAD standards and not reinvent the wheel. But I'm going to pull up an old AutoCAD drawing for you guys that are new to this world. You will probably have never seen it before, but if you guys are old school AutoCADers like me, you probably get a giggle out of this drawing that I'll pull up. But it's an old drawing that kind of it's going to help you make sense out of the limitations in Revit, especially because what we're talking about here is taking from like a 2D based workflow into a 3D based workflow, right? So knowing the difference between modeling and drafting is really also important for you guys that are new users to Revit. Can you draft in Revit? Sure you can. The problem is that every line that you put down, circle, arc, and rectangle, that's just 2D or line, kind of increases file size and reduces file performance. So you want to keep detailing down to a minimum. When we get into the architectural side of it and doing those types of details, we do have hatch patterns. They're called filled regions, all that kind of stuff to add detail to your work. So there are some exceptions, but keep the drafting down to a minimum. If you want to draft or you need to draft, you can draft in Revit or in AutoCAD. Another big thing about the Revit rules to understand is that to note that it's built on a single database. So it's database driven. Unlike an AutoCAD drawing where you kind of compile a whole bunch of files together to create the project, Revit is one single file, with the exception of if you're in the engineering side of it, you have 2 or 3 files, maybe 4, that they all kind of correlate or they're referenced within each other. But it's database driven. And the good thing about that is that you can create schedules of the model and manage that data. So we'll get into that. But one thing to take note of for you guys that are brand new to this, Revit does not support previous versions. So you can't do a save as to an older version. This is why we asked the poll question of the version of Revit that you're in. So if you're moving into Revit and you start customizing everything and creating new title blocks and new textiles, and you're doing it all in 2023, and you've had 3 days of work of developing standards, and on Monday you get a job that's in 2020 Revit. Well, all those standards you developed in 2023, you cannot use in 2020. So keep that in mind when we're working with Revit and developing anything from scratch, or you're developing your standards, is you want to do it in the oldest version possible. And that with Revit, you get a license for 3 versions. So right now, recommended is 2021. 2020 is okay. 2021 is probably better. But create anything or develop your standards, your templates, anything custom in that version, and then upgrade it as you need. 2022, 2023, you might have to manage a couple of versions, but we'll get into that here as well, as far as best practices that come along with getting ready and getting involved in a Revit project. We're going to get into some concepts in Revit that you want to get comfortable with. Terminology like models, elements, parameters, and families. If you don't learn how to speak the Revit language, it's really going to be hard to ask the right questions, right? So this is the difference between Revit and CAD, or 2D and 3D, especially in this solution, where the terminology is going to make all the difference. So make sure that you understand what these terms are. Model geometry, that's basically what you're constructing. Elements are also the same, the building blocks that basically represent, the 3D model. So all of your walls, doors, and windows. If you're an engineer, it's your lights, duct, pipe, plumbing fixtures, etc. Parameters. This is so that you can get all the information out of the model that you need, all the data, right? The whole BIM process. What is BIM? Building information modeling, right? It's the I in BIM, the information. So parameters can be customized. There is an external element to parameters, like what we call shared parameters. That's important to note. So if you guys are taking notes and you're trying to figure out everything you need to know about Revit, shared parameters should be on your list to Google or to research. And then families. This, for you guys that are old school AutoCADers like me, is what we call blocks, or dynamic blocks in the newer versions of AutoCAD. They're 3D models or 3D content that you can develop yourself or download and get from the internet, right? So from your manufacturers, etc., right? Workflow is important, and to documenting the workflow and making sure that you guys kind of get everybody on the team on the same page is going to be critical, so everybody understands A to B, right? Which way you're going, what you're going to do, how you're going to do it. You can pull in 2D CAD files to start with. You would link them in or XREF them in and not keep them in to a drawing, but there's a process for that. Some firms that are moving right into Revit right now from AutoCAD are asking, with a little bit of time, to kind of get there. They ask us, or they ask me, and they said, what have you seen that's been successful to make this transition? We call it a pilot project. A pilot project is, maybe your Revit gurus in-house, anybody that's willing to move into the software right now can start a project that, maybe a small project that's not very complicated, or better yet, an existing project. So you can basically take the design guessing out of it, out of the project, and you basically are just redeveloping an AutoCAD project that's completed in the Revit world, and that's going to really help you figure out where your roadblocks are, what you need to compromise with, and also what to develop and customize, right? So it really, building a pilot team and a pilot project can really help make the transitions way more successful. You basically just built your in-house support team as well. After that first project, those guys will be the Revit gurus for the next set of group that comes in, and so on, right? So it's a real good way of developing or transitioning into the Revit world from a CAD-based workflow. But note that it's going to take time, right? Have patience. It's not simple. I don't want to make this sound like it's just easy peasy, right? But it takes a little bit of time. It takes, some effort and some, imagination to make sure that you guys can, really accomplish what you need to get done, for your deliverables. Revit projects, when you're setting up projects and utilizing, because we're coming from 2D to 3D CAD files, right? There's a easy process for that. You can link in or XREF AutoCAD files into a Revit project so that if the information needs to change or update, you can just open up the CAD file. You already know AutoCAD, and change and do what you normally do, save it. When you get back into the Revit model, it updates just like an XREF. So there's a workflow for that. But the CAD files need to be clean. One of the things that when I teach AutoCAD is to always use the audit, purge, clean up your CAD files, flatten them out, make sure that things are not non-coplanar, all over the place. CAD files can get real messy. You can have a real big CAD file with 30 XREFs, and only 2 of them are being used, and all the others are in a state of unloaded or unreferenced, right? So not good, right? So bad CAD practices brought into Revit is not good. That's exactly what you want to avoid. So everybody wants to cut the AutoCAD cord right off the bat because bad practices can be transferred into Revit, but it's not realistic, especially if you're trying to make a successful transition. You're going to want to do a little bit of both for about 2 or 3 projects. About the 3rd project in, you can cut the AutoCAD cord, and you'll be full-blown Revit from then on out. Setting up the correct template is critical. Establishing your grids and your levels, we'll talk about here in a bit, and then utilizing the software itself to maintain and manage like schedules and views. So it's all kind of built into the project. We'll get into that in a second. Now, once you get the handle on Revit, understand what workflow you're going to be taking advantage of, and how are you going to do it, what team you have on here. Working in a team is also something that's going to be a little bit different from the AutoCAD world. Revit has what they call a work-sharing process, and it's basically you enable the project on the server with this process called centralizing it. And once it's saved and centralized on the server, everybody gets out of it, or you get out of it. One person does this. And then say we have 5 guys on the team. Everybody then goes to open up the project off of the server, and they make automatically copies of it on their, it saves to their computer. It's built into Revit. I'll show you the paths. They're called local files. And everybody does their own work, and it's how Revit does the whole read-only thing with like in AutoCAD, where you can't work, 2 people can't work in the same AutoCAD file at the same time. If 2 people open up an AutoCAD file, it'll give one of them a read-only error, said that you can open it, but so-and-so has it, and you can't plot or save or make changes or do anything to it, right? It's what we call read-only. Revit doesn't have read-only, but it does have this work-sharing mechanism that you guys need to be familiar, especially when you're working in a team, on how it works. And then what we call work sets. Work sets kind of help divvy up the work, into disciplines, different model types or different parts of the model, exterior, interior, shells, furniture, structure, etc. So we'll get into work sets in a little bit. All right. So kind of getting started here. Let me move this stuff out of the way. Getting started with Revit. Again, I'm going to be doing this in 2023. On the left-hand side, we have a couple of options here to start with. We have our models section and our families. Our models are the projects that we can create, open, or generate, right? You'll see a recent list here of different files for different models that Autodesk provides you. So if you guys don't have anything to practice with, you can open up these sample files for architecture, structure. And if you see the word systems, and you guys are engineers, this is systems in the Revit world means MEP. So this is the sample MEP project, structural project, and architectural project. Same thing with the families. It's an architectural family, a structural family, and a MEP family. Now, when you're navigating these, you can create them and open them up and manipulate them if needed. You could also access what we call BIM 360 in the cloud or cloud projects, utilizing your Autodesk docs here to locate projects that are based in the Autodesk, on the Autodesk servers, right? So that's another option here that you might want to explore. For brand new users, when you're done with this webinar and you want to do more, you're really excited about this, you want to learn more, here's some what I tell everybody in all my training. Everybody asks about the book in Revit. Is there a book for Revit to learn from? There are some really good books out there. I would highly recommend Googling it and getting some options there. You can see the reviews. But here's the free one, right? It comes with Revit. When you click on the online help hyperlink here, it takes you directly to what I call the free Revit book. It's a digital Revit book. If you have the internet, it's gonna pull right up. This little keyword right here will allow you to type in topics just like you would in Google, and it'll give you everything you need to know about that topic. There's even videos here, 146 videos, different skill levels, right? There's a lot of good stuff in here and information in this knowledge source that you guys should take advantage of, okay? And it's right here. It's pretty quick, online help. You can even hit the question mark up here at the top. Let's see here. Now, when you do get started, what I was talking about earlier here, one of the main rules is to, again, never double-click through File Explorer. Say this is my project here, right? This is the project that I'm going to be sharing or showing with you guys. One of these here, I'm going to make one. But if I double-click here or right-click and use the Open command, that introduces corruption into the Revit world or into the Revit project. So it doesn't mean that you can't have a folder and have all a place where they're all saved somewhere like this. You just won't use this anymore to open and close and manage your projects. The first thing that you should note is that, again, second rule in Revit, the first rule is always use the proper template. The second rule is when you're opening up projects in Revit, you always go through the Open command here. Okay. Now, if you want to use the old school method, that's what this circle arrow is. Will take you back to this, what I call a zero state Revit. And you can go to the file pull down menu up here. Note again, if I hit this little button up here, home, it takes me back to the recent screen. If I hit the circle arrow, now I can see the file pull down menu. And in the file pull down menu is where I can create new projects, create new content or new families, etc., right? Title blocks, symbols, massing. I can open up cloud models, projects, Revit files, IFCs, and there's even a directory here for more sample files. So if you guys go to the file pull-down menu and go to open and let this scroll down to the bottom to sample files, these sample files come with your software when you install it for that version. And there's a whole bunch of cool different projects in here. The golden nugget, there's some advanced options in here, some simple stuff. But these are just projects, again, you can kind of take a look at and see how things are done out there as well. They're at your fingertips, right? So I'm going to go back to the recent screen and go and do it this way. I'm going to go to the Open command here. I'm going to navigate to my training folder or the webinar folder. And then I'm going to just select on a project here. Now, here's the reason number 3 why you always want to use the Open command through Revit. Earlier, I mentioned that you can't save backwards, right? So this is where you can see what version the project is in, right? How do I know what version that's in? Nowhere outside of Revit will it tell you what version that file is in. So you can't make a mistake by accidentally going forwards or backwards. You have to highlight the models, and then you'll see the version tell you right here in the image. So that, for most PowerCAD users, you're not going to be going slow enough to really see that and pay attention to that small text there. So what I tell everybody is best practice is to put the version in the name of the project. So always keep this as an option. I use R as a release 23. So this tells me this is Revit 2023 file, and I know what project and what version to open it up in. Okay, so that can help your users also when you're working in these projects not accidentally upgrade or get into it with the wrong version. right? So they don't have to keep asking. If you leave it like this here, you have to slow it down and wait for that, right? The other reason why opening is so important is because of this audit checkbox down here at the bottom, audit, okay? Now in 2020, if you already have a little bit of Revit, this audit checkbox gives you this ominous warning that says this operation could take forever and it should be used for periodic maintenance of large files and preparation for upgrade to a new release, right? And that is valid, but if that's it, like you're opening up a Revit 2015 file and you're trying to upgrade it all the way to 2023. Here's the thing, if you guys are taking notes, here's a best practice. You never skip more than 2 versions of Revit in a file. So if you're downloading families or content from your manufacturers and they're in like old school Revit 2012, 2015, the program has changed so much in the background that, you know, a lot of the programming of the stuff in the background, the language is completely different. So that's how corruption gets introduced into your projects, right? So it could be a bad thing, and how you avoid it is you have to upgrade them, save them all to the latest version, and run the audit while you're opening them up and saving them, and that's how you would bring in or update a family properly. But that's what this audit does. It helps your projects. And then I get asked all the time about this. Now in 2023, you can actually turn this off so that it just becomes second nature without worried about this warning. This warning usually stops people, especially when you're new to this. I always tell everybody, ignore the warning, just click on OK, and continue to open. Now, what does the audit do? The audit basically scans and detects corruption in the project and fixes it. That's pretty simple. But there's no report to tell you, hey, Gabe, this is what it fixed, or this is what it repaired, and these were the families that were causing the problems, right? So that's unfortunate, but at least get into that as a good habit. I tell everybody that asks me, do we have to do it? No, but get into the habit of doing it. I do it every time I open up any project. It doesn't matter. If that becomes a habit of yours, that's a good habit to have. You're doing everybody else a solid on the project, right? So this is basically what your Revit projects would look like. You'll have your building here. Now, one thing that's different that makes this 3D from 2D are what you're looking at here in this elevation. These are what we call Revit Datums or Revit levels. Here under the Architectural tab in the ribbon up at the top in our toolbox up here, we have what we call the Build panel. We have our Circulation, Model, Lumen area, and over here on the end is the Datum panel. So if I needed to build my own levels, and this, as architects or as designers, is where you start. When you start a brand new project, you have to build these levels in order for everything to kind of come together as you're designing. So not only is the template important, but how you're starting is also going to be important. Okay? And then if we have the time, I'll even try to set up an engineering project to show you guys that are architects how that works, and engineers how that works. So hopefully we'll get a minute to do so. Okay? So you set the levels up first. These are your levels or your datums. You set these up, and then once you set these up, that's what it creates over here in the project browser. And again, I'm just going to turn off my properties temporarily here so you can see my browser. The project browser is what I tell everybody is what I call the table of contents. This is the file explorer that you would go and manage, 10 different DWGs or 50 to 100 drawings and, cut sheets and all that to see what the actual project is, right? So everything in Revit in here kind of lives in this project browser or the table of contents. If you're an Autocad, this is kind of built-in sheet set manager or project navigator, like I said. Everything's broken up into floor plans, ceiling plans, 3D views, elevation sections, and so on. Down here, we even have schedules. There's area schedules, door schedules that you can create. And then we have our documentation or our sheets. And these sheets are basically a byproduct in Revit. So again, I was talking about standards and developing of standards, and yeah, if you want your projects immediately to look like they've looked like for the last 25 years, it's going to take a little while. You do have to probably going to have to develop a pretty robust template. But once you've developed that template, a common theme in Revit is that you do it once and you never have to do it again, right? Because that it's built on that database, right? Or that it's database driven. You basically change it one place and it updates throughout the entire project. So, really kind of you'll see the benefits of it all once you kind of gone through a couple of good projects, okay? All right, so this is kind of what we're looking at here, and let me see if we can kind of start into developing this. So let me get out of these. Now, these are just tabs up here that I can cycle through. The right-click method that I use, that you're going to see windows pop up on my screen here, is I'm using what I call the right-click method. If you guys are Revit people already, this is what I tell everybody to help you get faster, or this is my productivity tricks for Revit. The right-click menus and your keyboard commands are essential to master, as well as the commands themselves. Okay, so I'm just turning on my palettes again, and then I'm going to close all this stuff out and get out of this model. All right. So if you are brand new and you guys are starting from scratch here with Revit, again, you would start here from this interface here. Let me kind of minimize this so I can kind of walk you through it. So under Models here, there's Models New. And this is the most important part of it when you get started. If you're an engineer, you don't want to start with the architectural default. If you're an architect, you don't want to start with the mechanical default template or the systems default template. What did I say systems stood for in Revit? That's MEP. Now, construction would work, but construction is pretty heavy, but I'll show you some advantages to this construction default and where we start off with the architectural default. If I leave it set to none, it's kind of like the old school AutoCAD where I have to basically define all my parameters first, and then it'll create a super generic model or starting project. Now, talking about this template here, on the Browse button, these are the templates that live on your computer out of the box when it comes to Revit. So because the number one rule is always use the proper template, it really is what puts most people off right off the bat. They're like, well, I have to set up a template now, or where are these templates? I don't have one, right? Well, they have some that are out of the box that you can start with, that you can use to take advantage of these, make them your own. There's a residential one here. There's a commercial one, a construction. There's the systems and structural ones here, plumbing and mechanical ones, right? So there's a couple of options that you have available in here for use and to take advantage of. And I'll show you how to do that here in a bit. Now, one thing to take note of is that the templates are of a different file type than a project. So there's a couple of file types, being new to Revit, you also need to be aware of. A project template, or something that's going to have all your settings and schedules and everything ready to go, is going to be an RTE, right? When we're working in an actual Revit project, you'll see that the extension is an RVT, right? It's a Revit file, right? So these are the projects, and these are your templates, okay? We've got one more to learn, which are the families. It's an RFA, okay? I'm going to cancel out of this. I'm going to go to my architectural default, and I'm just going to click on OK. So once I've started with the proper template, then I shouldn't have any problems with my commands now, right? The first thing that I do, again, is I go into, when I'm in a template, a blank template, is I go into an elevation view here to take a look at the two default levels that come with every template. So if your engineers and your MEP and your structural guys are all have the same level one, whose is correct? The architect rules the roost, right? So you guys set your levels. Is this 100 feet or is this at 0 feet, 0 inches? Are your level 2, is it 19 foot or 19 foot 6? Top of steel, finished floor, what are you measuring to, right? So that's why it's critical to have your plan and to figure out this part first, set it up, and then once you start to do the modeling process, everything can kind of come together, okay? We'll get to that here in a second. Down at the bottom is what we call the view control bar in Revit, and this is where we control our scale, and we'll get into that here in a bit. Everything is annotative like we would do in Autocad, but we don't have to, again, set it up. It's kind of built into the process here. Now, if I pick on a level here and I delete it, look up on the screen. I'm going to delete level 2. It gives me a warning, and this is this database thing in Revit, and again, telling me, hey, what are you doing here? You're deleting that level, but along with that level, there's other stuff that's getting deleted. If you look in my project browser over here in the table of contents, I have level 1, level 2 site, level 1, level 2 ceiling, and then my 4 elevations, right? If I delete level 2 and I click on OK, look what happens over here on the left. Level 2 has magically disappeared from my project browser. One of the things most CAD users kind of struggle with is trying to grab this level 1 here, and I want to move it over here under elevations, and I can't move these views around the way I want to, or the way you would think you can move around a file. It doesn't work that way. The way these move around in the organization in the browser is through the properties up here, and it tells it where it's going to live in the project browser. Okay. Now, the reason why I deleted level 2 is to let you know is that how do we create these floor plans and ceiling plans and the rest of these? They're basically based off of your levels, and that's why you want to start here. Okay, always start with your levels, and I'll set this level here to 12 feet. For you AutoCADers, Revit defaults to feet, not inches. So if I type in 12, it's not a foot, it's 12 feet. If I type in 15 space 6, and the space bar is no longer an executable in this sequence either, I can do 15 foot 6, right? If I needed inches, I could do 15 space 0.625, hit enter. There's my 15 foot 5/8, right? So it even knows your decimal point. So you can just type it in and hit enter to accept that input, and it will automatically move and adjust, okay? Now, back here to my level 1 view, to start this project, all I really have to do is go into my tools now and start to draw in my design or my layouts. You can start with the actual floor first, or the structural slabs, and we'll talk about the difference between an architectural floor and a structural floor in a second. They're very similar. They're the same, except for that structural will actually show up in a structural model where architectural won't. So these are typically used for your materials like carpet, VCT, tile, that kind of stuff, wood. These are the actual foundations or the slabs, the concrete that you build in your projects. We've got our roofing tool here. We've got columns. Now, the component tool is, one of the questions that I get asked all the time right off the bat is, hey, Gabe, where's the furniture button, right? Where's the elevator button here in Revit? Where is the, you can kind of keep going on and on with different specialty or different components that you might be used to inserting into a project or a block right into the project. It might not be in this list here in this ribbon, so what do? Well, that's what a component is. Place a component. Basically, this says you can place in whatever you want, family-wise or content-wise, whatever block. So this is like universal block. So if you don't have a button for it, I want to put in an elevator. I go to component here. I use my pull-down list, and there's my furniture, parking spaces, trees, because I don't have a button for trees, that kind of stuff. So component is your universal family loader, okay? And then when I activate a command, look at the ribbon. Look how it works. When I click on the button component here, look at how the ribbon changes green, right? It turns into what we call a contextual tab. It's modify, place, component. I've got my modify tools over here. There's move, copy, rotate, offset, right? So you guys that are AutoCADers, again, there's your mirror command. I have my array and scale, my trim and extend, right? All those modify tools that make you effective in AutoCAD are here. You just have to learn how to use them in Revit. They're a little bit different, okay? And then the escape key is still your best friend in Revit. Like here, I need to get out of this. I don't want to place anything. I just hit escape a couple of times, or right-click cancel to exit out of a command. That's one thing that I get my new users get hung up on when I'm training them and I'm walking them through things, is to pick a command and then to get out of it, hit escape a couple of times to get out of it, right? All right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start a project here by going to the Insert tab, because I want to bring something in. I want to link in or XREF in something, and I can link in a Revit project. I can link in a CAD background. So I want to take advantage of my 2D information. So I'll go here to my CAD files, and I'll say, here's my architectural background here, and I'll bring it into this project. Now, what's important about bringing in anything into your Revit templates or your project when you're starting it out is to know what they call the positioning, the coordinate system, right? How is it built? Is it center to center, origin to origin? Is it shared coordinates or like a campus project, right? So you have your options here for positioning. Auto origin to origin or origin to internal origin is in AutoCAD what we call 0, 0, 0, right? I'm going to open it up, bring it in, and now I've got this 2D CAD background, but that's all it is. It's just a 2D CAD background, and it's nothing 3D, but I can represent that in Revit, print it out, and call it a day, and that's a Revit project, right? Not really, but that's kind of the way you can kind of get by on things. But so here, to start building out this model, I just need to use my commands here, and then in our command structures here, there's different options that I can choose, like lines here, and I can just go around and start picking lines, or I can just start drawing in my own shapes, right? So there's one box there, and I'm going to come back in, do one wing here, and then maybe I want to clean it up and put it all together, right? Get rid of some internal walls here. And as I'm doing that there with some walls, if I go back into my 3D view in my project browser, you'll see how it all comes in together, right? So as a matter of fact, I've got mine set up to, there we go, to mechanical. And I can start to put and piece this project together. Let me right click and maximize these. So now that I've got my basic structure started there, I can then now go in and start to build in and get rid of the background. So I can get rid of this CAD background. I can go into my imported categories, and it now lives here. So this is what we call the layer manager in AutoCAD. This basically controls your on-off switch for everything that you built into the project. We have a couple of categories called model categories, annotation categories, which are anything annotated or tags are separate. And then filters is how we apply color to things in the Revit world. But I'll turn off the background, and now I've got my elevation markers here. Let me correct these real quick. And now with this here, I can then build in my floor. So for this part of this floor, I'm going to use my floor structure here. And then I'm going to go around drawing in my line work. Actually, I don't need that line or that line. This is what we call sketch mode. And sketch mode, you have to finish this out and think of like a polyline with AutoCAD. It needs to be a closed loop. And these double lines basically telling me the direction or the span direction of the structure. So maybe I would do these in 3 different slabs and have my structure going left to right here, top to bottom here and here, whatever. I'm just going to keep this in one. Now I finish it out, and it'll throw in this span direction symbol in there. But now if I go back to my 3D view, right, now I've got my project started there. I got my floor. I can start building this. And then if I can come back, go to my level here, and this is why the levels are so important. I set that to 12 feet, but everything that I'm building is beyond that 12 feet, right? So I could go in here and use my right-click method to select all of these walls, and then in the properties palette, I'll say put those all to level 2, and now I've got them all set up to level 2 so that when I drag or move my level 2 to a different height, so maybe that, like I said, is 19.6 now, everything automatically adjusts so my walls stay put with the actual level. And that's kind of, again, why you start here with these first, and then when you generate the geometry, you can kind of go back. You don't have to be perfect with everything. You can kind of go back, get your design laid out, put in your floors, your walls, doors, and windows, and then you can massage it, I guess, or fine-tune it after the fact. And at the same time, utilize different views like 3D views, sections like this here to see how it's all coming together, okay? So you can take advantage of all of this to really do a bigger, better design, and utilizing what you already have in the background, okay? Now, when creating these types of projects, like this here, these projects get to be pretty heavy as far as, like the project browser, when you have multiple people running the project at the same time, right? So what I'll do with this model here is, say, for instance, I'll go to level 2 real quick. Give me 1 second here. Let me put in a roof. See, leave that there. It's going to make me want to do this all the way around, which I will do it real quick. Let me see here. I'll draw it in. I normally wouldn't be this kind of like just drawing it this fast, but I know. But for time's sake, trying to make sure that I draw this right. All right, here we go. There's my roof in there, right? So I can put in my roof, I put in my slab, I've got my walls. And then once everything is in here, I can take these elements and I can start to swap them out for, different content to see. I want brick here, I want CMU or masonry there, and this wall is going to be, say some brick on metal stud as well. So, you can change out your materials. I've got concrete, CMU on this one there, again, masonry, right? So masonry units. So, again, you can swap out your materials once you kind of get the idea of what you're trying to do. And then I've got like these other commands, like my door command. I can throw in doors. Now, if I don't have the double doors, right? So this is where you would use your load family option when you're in a command and you don't have the option to choose from here. You would go to load family, and load family should take you straight to your, again, out-of-the-box Revit library, which should be here. Program data, English Imperial Library. And I'll go to my doors section here, and I'll put in a double flush panel here. It'll bring up a type catalog so you can choose which one you want to bring in. I want to bring in my 72 by 84. And now I've got doors that I can put all over the place in this project. All right, and then same thing for windows. If I go to my windows, these are the windows that are preloaded. You come in and you can place your windows in a project and watch them develop as you place them. Okay, you can tile your views here, so you don't have to be all in one view. You can have multiple views in Revit, right? And then just like I was talking about with the database, right? So say my wall schedule, right? I'm going to go here to my schedules and quantities. And there's no schedules in here. I'm going to right-click on the schedules and quantities to create a new schedule. And these are all the different categories of schedules that I can create. I'm going to go here to my wall schedule and say I need to do how many walls I have, the family and type, maybe the fire rating, the length, width, area, material. I don't think I have that here. Gotta make sure. I'll come back to that later. And I can generate a schedule pretty much on the fly of anything that you want. And, you know, we don't call this family and type, right? This is not the parameter that we would look for in a schedule. We want one called walls or something, right? You can certainly set this up however you'd like. We don't use count. We use quantity. You can format this however you'd like. There's all different types of things you can do when it comes to schedules. But you can generate them pretty quickly, like this here, and populate the information. I can go back in and go into the door schedule and do the same thing. Go to count, family and type, frame type, width, height, and I'm done. Right. Now, again, the focus on the database part of this and what makes this a little bit better to kind of make the transition into is this right here. Let me show you something. I'm going to go into my 3D view. Let me kind of make this kind of highlight here. Give me 1 second here. And then I'm going to open up my schedules side by side, both my schedules, my door and my wall, my door schedule. I'm going to tile these together. So as I develop the design, say I take this door and I remove it, look at the schedule automatically update when I change the layout. When I go back in and I put in more doors, this is what a template or a good template will kind of do, is that you focus here on this end on the design and modeling your project. Once you do a schedule, then that schedule never has to be recreated again. Basically, the template will look like this, and as you start to develop the model, single doors, right? It'll automatically update in the background. Okay? So I can put in whatever I want into this model and keep track of this. This is what I was talking about with the data. And then another thing about these schedules in this database here is that when you want to make a change or an edit to this, sorry, I got out of that real quick. But say I'm in the schedule, you could even use the schedule tools to highlight it in the model, and it'll take me to a view of where that is located in the project, and then I can go and do whatever I need to and manipulate it. So it's that powerful as well. Built in under the Manage tab here, under Additional Settings, are built-in line styles, right? So your line weights are all built into this. You don't have to worry about, your graphic standards. They're all there. If you notice yours looks real cartoony like this, it's because this is the line weights tool in Revit, thin lines, right? Now, because we've only got about 5 minutes here, let me just wrap this up real quick for you guys that are engineers. What you would do to start out a project is you would go in here and use the proper default template. I'll say systems. You would link in or XREF in the architectural background. Again, remember, getting the positioning is super important. And now in my mechanical templates or MEP templates, there's my project defined in the background, right? So as the designers, you guys it makes all the difference setting this up early on and not moving it around. Okay, so keep that in mind. And this is basically what you would use Collaborate Copy Monitor to copy monitor the links and the levels and grids, okay, for this MEP project. So I'll save this one as MEP. So they all kind of work together. Now, once you get into what you've developed in here, you could go backwards. You don't necessarily want to go back to AutoCAD, but what if I did? You could use these tools like export here to CAD formats. I can generate my own DWGs, my own CAD exports, and those CAD exports will look something like this here. They come with their own layer styles and everything already generated, kind of set up for you. So you can kind of go back and forth using the AIA layer for 256 if that's your standard, right? The one thing that I did want to show you here was this with CAD files, right? Because in AutoCAD model space, it's up to 10 points of decimal precisions. This is the solar system drawn to scale in AutoCAD model space. There's Earth. This is the moon orbiting the Earth. And on the moon, there's the lunar lander that's still there, right? This is how vast model space is. I have a couple of things here that I want to show you guys that kind of makes a difference in Revit. Is this link here, you guys want to write this down. What's the distance limit from internal origin point in for imported geometry in Revit? Revit is limited to 20 miles. So if I would have brought that solar system into the Revit world to start this hybrid workflow, it would cause an internal or an automatic fatal error, right? So because you can use AutoCAD in Revit, what I want to leave you guys with is this. Be sure to clean up your CAD files. Don't just bring in CAD files willy-nilly. You might have a node hanging out there in the moon, and you're trying to bring it into your Revit project, and it's going to crash everything. So clean everything up, W-block all your CAD stuff, flatten it out, purge them, audit them, and then use those CAD files in your Revit projects. But make that a SOP. That has to be a standard operating procedure, especially for civil files, because civil files easily can exceed 20 miles. If you're an architect and you're putting helicopters and site stuff, Lamborghinis, 10 miles from your project, when that goes into the engineer side of things, those just really bogs down a project big time. It really hurts the project. So make sure you guys make best practices out of this. I would say 10 miles should be your limit, half of this distance, but anything beyond a mile from the actual project, the project really starts to degrade big time, right? So keep that in mind when you're setting up your projects and you want to, set up a different coordinate system for it and see if it's really worth it. The support and learning is this is in the help. So if you go into the help here, right, all of this is your getting started guide. So if you need extra stuff or extra help here, there's tutorials here, right? And there's even a download zip file here where you can download files and go through these tutorials to learn how to use Revit as well. This is good free stuff here that'll help you get started with Revit. And it's in Revit. Hit the question mark, or in the start screen here. It's right here on the online help. Go straight to it. It's going to pull up this page here. You can go to getting started here, and there are tutorials. There's beginner workflows, industry workflows, etc. So take advantage of this, and it really kind of will help you kind of move your Revit experience a little bit further.